A helicopter lands in a ditch full of bodies. The pilot points his own machine gun at fellow American soldiers and gives an order. If they fire on these civilians again, open fire on them. That happened. An American stopped an American massacre, mid-massacre. This is the story of the worst things the United States military ever did to the people it swore to protect, and the men who tried to stop it. Every army in history has a body count of shame. Moments where soldiers, under pressure, fear, or orders, crossed the line from war into atrocity. The United States is no exception. Over 160 years, from the plains of Colorado to the deserts of Iraq, American forces have been responsible for massacres, torture programs, and cover-ups that were investigated, photographed, confessed to, and in some cases, punished, and in many cases, buried. This video is not about hating a country. It's about the documented, court-martialed, congressionally investigated record of what happened when war went wrong. Some of these events you've heard of. Some were kept out of headlines for decades. All of them are real. September 28, 1901. The island of Samar, in the Philippines. Filipino guerrillas ambush a company of American soldiers eating breakfast in the town of Balangiga. 48 Americans die, hacked apart with bolo knives in under 10 minutes. It's one of the worst single losses the U.S. Army suffers in the entire Philippine-American War. Washington is furious. The response is worse than the crime. Brigadier General Jacob H. Smith gives the order to a subordinate, Major Littleton Waller, kill everyone capable of bearing arms against the United States. When Waller asks for an age limit, Smith reportedly answers, 10 years old. Turn the interior of Samar into, in his words, a howling wilderness. American troops burn villages, destroy food stores, and are later accused of executing prisoners. Smith is court-martialed in 1902, not for the killings, but for conduct prejudicial to good order. He's quietly retired. But the order wasn't even the most disturbing part of this war. During the same war, American soldiers use a torture method nicknamed the water cure. A Filipino prisoner is held down, a rifle barrel or bamboo tube forced into his mouth, and gallons of water poured in until the stomach distends in agony, sometimes followed by soldiers jumping on the swollen abdomen to force it back out. It's documented in U.S. Senate hearings in 1902, the Lodge Committee, where American soldiers testified, under oath, that they had personally administered it. Some officers are court-martialed. Most receive light sentences or none at all. The technique will resurface, under a new name, a century later. Rewind further. November 29, 1864, southeastern Colorado Territory. A peaceful encampment of Cheyenne and Arapaho people, led by Chief Black Kettle, is flying both a white flag of truce and an American flag over his own teepee. He had been told this would guarantee safety. Colonel John Chivington leads roughly 675 Colorado militia into the camp at dawn. What follows is not a battle. It's a slaughter. Somewhere between 150 and 230 people are killed, the majority of them women, children, and the elderly. Soldiers later boast in Denver saloons about mutilating bodies and displaying scalps and body parts as trophies on stage at a local theater. A congressional investigation, the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, condemns the massacre in 1865, calling it a foul and dastardly massacre. Chivington is never criminally punished. He's already resigned his commission by the time the report is published. So far, we've seen a colonial war and a genocide-adjacent massacre on U.S. soil, two very different kinds of horror. But American violence against native nations wasn't a one-time event. It escalated for another 26 years. December 29, 1890. Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota. The U.S. 7th Cavalry, the same regiment once commanded by George Custer, surrounds a band of roughly 350 Lakota Sioux led by Chief Spotted Elk, also known as Bigfoot. The army is disarming the group when a shot rings out. No one knows to this day who fired first. The cavalry opens fire with rifles and 4 rapid-fire Hotchkiss guns positioned on a ridge above the camp. Men, women, and children are cut down as they try to flee. Estimates of the dead range from 250 to 300. Bodies are later found frozen in the snow up to 2 miles from the camp, cut down while running. 20 soldiers are awarded the Medal of Honor for their role that day, an honor that native advocacy groups and members of Congress have spent decades trying to get revoked. It would take 60 more years and a different war on the other side of the planet for the U.S. military to be caught doing something disturbingly similar, this time to the very people it was supposedly there to save. July 1950. The opening weeks of the Korean War. Hundreds of South Korean refugees, men, women, children, are fleeing south, away from advancing North Korean forces, exactly as American commanders had told them to. Near the village of No-gun-ri, U.S. soldiers from the 7th Cavalry Regiment stopped the refugee column, then opened fire, first from the air, then on the ground, driving survivors into a drainage culvert under a railroad bridge. Survivors later testify that soldiers fired into the tunnel for 3 days. Estimates of the dead range from 250 to over 400. For nearly 50 years, the U.S. military denies it happened. Then, in 1999, the Associated Press publishes a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation built on soldier testimony and declassified documents. In 2001, the Pentagon finally acknowledges the killings occurred, calling them an unfortunate tragedy rather than a war crime, a distinction the survivors and their families reject to this day. Colonial War, Westward Genocide, a Cold War cover-up. Next, we go to the conflict most associated with American war crimes in the public imagination, and the single most infamous massacre in U.S. military history is waiting at the end of this video. Before we get to the massacre everyone's waiting for, understand the environment that produced it. In Vietnam, U.S. commanders designate huge swaths of the countryside as free-fire zones, areas where anyone present could be treated as a combatant, no questions asked. Between late 1968 and mid-1969, the 9th Infantry Division runs Operation Speedy Express in the Mekong Delta. The official body count, over 10,000 enemy dead, for the loss of only 267 Americans. A kill ratio so lopsided that a Newsweek investigation in 1972 concludes a huge number of the dead were unarmed civilians, not Viet Cong. Some historians estimate as many as 5,000 of the enemy killed were non-combatants. No one is ever prosecuted. Fast forward to Afghanistan, December 2002. Bagram Air Base. A 22-year-old Afghan taxi driver named Dilawar is detained on suspicion of involvement in a rocket attack, an accusation that later turns out to be false. Over 4 days, interrogators and guards chain his arms above his head to the ceiling of his cell and strike his legs so many times. Investigators later document at least 100 baton blows, that a military coroner rules his death a homicide, noting his legs had been pulpified. Another detainee, Habibullah, dies in the same facility around the same time, also ruled a homicide. A New York Times investigation in 2005, and later the documentary Taxi to the Dark Side, exposed the deaths in detail. Several soldiers are eventually convicted at court-martial, though most sentences are notably light, some involving no prison time at all. But Bagram wasn't the facility that would define this war in the public's memory. That would be a prison outside Baghdad. Spring 2004. Photographs leak from Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and the images shock the world. A hooded man standing on a box, wires attached to his fingers, told he'll be electrocuted if he falls. Naked prisoners stacked into human pyramids. A prisoner led on a leash like a dog. Detainees threatened with unmuzzled dogs. An internal army investigation, the Taguba Report, confirms sadistic, blatant, and wanton criminal abuses. 11 soldiers are eventually convicted, including Private Lindai England and Specialist Charles Granner, who are seen smiling and giving a thumbs-up next to a corpse packed in ice. No officer above the rank of lieutenant colonel is ever imprisoned for it. 2 different wars, 2 different decades, but the same pattern. Abuse happens on the ground, photographs or coroners expose it, and punishment lands almost entirely on the lowest-ranking soldiers involved. This next one isn't a single event, it's a program. After the 9th of November, the CIA builds a network of secret prisons, black sites, in countries around the world, to interrogate terror suspects outside the reach of U.S. courts. The 2014 Senate Intelligence Committee torture report reveals the details. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the self-described mastermind of 9/11, is waterboarded 183 times in a single month. Detainees are subjected to sleep deprivation lasting up to 180 hours. That's 7.5 straight days without sleep, often while shackled standing, arms above their heads. At least one detainee, Gul Rahman, freezes to death, chained to a wall in near-freezing temperatures at a site nicknamed the Salt Pit. The report documents a practice euphemistically called rectal rehydration on detainees who weren't medically dehydrated. No CIA officer is ever criminally charged for the program. November 19, 2005. Haditha, Iraq. An IED explosion kills a U.S. Marine in a convoy. In the hours that follow, Marines from Kilo Company enter nearby homes and, according to a subsequent Naval Criminal Investigative Service inquiry, kill 24 unarmed Iraqi civilians, including women, children, and an elderly man in a wheelchair. Initial military reports described the deaths as resulting from the bomb blast and a firefight with insurgents. Time magazine's independent investigation and photos of bullet-riddled walls inside the homes contradict that account entirely. Charges are filed against 8 Marines. Over the following years, nearly all charges are dropped or reduced. Only one Marine faces any punishment at all, a reduction in rank, with no prison time, for one Marine, out of the deaths of 24 people. Somehow, this still isn't the darkest chapter. 2 more, and then we reach the one this whole video has been building to. October 3, 2015. Kunduz, Afghanistan. A Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, trauma hospital is operating normally, its GPS coordinates on file with U.S. forces exactly as required. A U.S. Air Force AC-130 gunship circles the compound for nearly half an hour and opens fire, striking the main hospital building repeatedly over roughly 30 minutes despite the hospital radioing that it was being attacked in real time. 42 people are killed, including staff and patients burned alive in their beds in the intensive care unit. A U.S. military investigation calls it a tragic but avoidable accident, attributing it to crew error and equipment malfunction. MSF rejects that framing and formally requests an independent war crimes investigation, a request the U.S. denies. 16 U.S. service members are disciplined administratively. None face criminal charges. Across both the Afghanistan and Yemen theaters, U.S. airstrikes have hit wedding celebrations on multiple documented occasions, moments when large, festive gatherings of extended families are mistaken, from thousands of feet in the air or via drone feed, for militant convoys. In one widely reported case in December 2013, a drone strike on a wedding convoy in Yemen's Al-Baida province kills roughly 12 to 15 people. In an earlier case in Afghanistan's Wek Bagtu village in 2008, villagers and local officials say a strike on a wedding party killed dozens, mostly women and children, though the U.S. military's own count differs sharply from local tribal accounts, a gap that appears again and again across the drone war, because the people counting the bodies and the people ordering the strikes are almost never the same people. Now, the one this video has been building toward the entire time. The massacre that changed how the world saw the Vietnam War, and how America saw itself. Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry, enters the hamlet of My Lai expecting to find Viet Cong fighters. They find no armed resistance at all. Only civilians, mostly elderly men, women, and children, still cooking breakfast. Under the command of Lieutenant William Kaye, soldiers begin rounding villages into groups. Then they open fire. Survivors and later investigators describe families lined up in drainage ditches and executed with rifle fire and machine guns. Homes are burned. Livestock is killed. Some women are raped before being killed. Over the following hours, somewhere between 300 and 504 Vietnamese civilians are killed. The U.S. Army's own investigation settles on 347, while a Vietnamese government memorial lists 504 names. And then, in the middle of the massacre, something almost impossible happens. A 24-year-old helicopter pilot, Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., flying reconnaissance overhead, sees the bodies piling up and realizes American soldiers are killing unarmed civilians. He lands his helicopter directly between a group of fleeing villagers hiding in a bunker and the American troops pursuing them. He orders his 2-door gunners, Glenn Andriotta and Lawrence Colburn, to train their weapons on the advancing American soldiers, their own countrymen, and gives the order that opens this entire video. If they fire on these civilians again, open fire on them. Thompson then radios for additional helicopters to evacuate the villages he can save. He personally coaxes a small number of survivors out of a bunker and flies them to safety. Thompson reports the massacre immediately. He is initially ignored, then quietly investigated, and for years afterward is treated as a traitor by fellow soldiers, receiving hate mail and even, he later says, dead animals left on his porch. The massacre itself is covered up by the army for over a year, until journalist Seymour Hersh breaks the story in November 1969, sparking global outrage. Lieutenant Kaye is court-martialed and convicted of murdering 22 civilians in 1971, sentenced to life in prison at hard labor. President Nixon, under public pressure, intervenes and has him moved to house arrest at Fort Benning within days. Kaye ultimately serves about 3.5 years, entirely under house arrest, before being paroled. He is the only person ever convicted for My Lai. It would take until 1998, 30 years later, for Hugh Thompson and his crew to be awarded the Soldier's Medal, the Army's highest honor for bravery not involving direct combat with an enemy, for saving Vietnamese civilians from other American soldiers. From a colonial howling wilderness order to a helicopter pilot aiming his own guns at his own army to stop a massacre, the through line across 160 years is the same. The atrocities were rarely secret for long, the evidence was rarely destroyed completely, and the punishment almost never matched the scale of what happened. The soldiers who tried to do the right thing, Hugh Thompson, the whistleblowers at Abu Ghraib, the journalists who broke these stories, are often remembered worse, for years, than the men who pulled the triggers. If the fact that Hugh Thompson pointed his own guns at fellow American soldiers to stop My Lai left you stunned, you need to see our next video, the whistleblowers who exposed their own governments and paid for it. Drop a comment. Which case in this video did you not know about before today? Subscribe if you want the darkest, best documented history explained the same way, every week.